Have you ever wondered about the mysteries behind the story of Cain in the Bible? After all, who was his wife? And how could he have children if only Adam, Eve, and Abel are mentioned? These questions lead us to a fascinating investigation into the early chapters of Genesis and make us question, were there more people on earth at that time? In this video, you will get all these answers. If you are curious about biblical narratives and love to uncover their deepest mysteries, subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss any of our videos. Additionally, by liking our videos, you help us reach more people with biblical content. Exploring Cain's dilemma is an opportunity to learn and reflect on the origins of faith and human existence. In the biblical account, driven by jealousy and anger, Cain commits the horrendous act of taking his brother Abel's life. This act represents not only the first human tragedy recorded in the Bible. When Cain committed fratricide, he not only took his brother Abel's life, but also unleashed a series of profound consequences that reflected not only his own guilt, but also the nature of human sin. God, as the supreme judge, responds to Cain's sinful act with severe and immediate punishment. This punishment unfolds in two main parts: a curse pronounced upon Cain and his subsequent exile. Besides the physical curse, Cain is also condemned to exile, forced to wander as a solitary wanderer. This exile represents a separation not only from God's physical presence, but also from human communion. Cain is left to the mercy of his own conscience, bearing the weight of his nefarious choice in a state of loneliness and spiritual alienation. God placed a mark on Cain in response to Cain's expressed concern about being killed by others he might encounter. After being cursed and condemned to exile for his terrible act of fratricide, Cain feared vengeance from others who might find and recognize him as Abel's killer. This concern for his safety reflects the fear and anxiety he faced in his new state of exile and solitude. By placing the mark on Cain, God offered a guarantee of protection against any mortal vengeance. This mark served as a distinctive sign that identified Cain as someone under divine protection, preventing others from killing him in pursuit of justice for Abel's murder. Essentially, the mark was a demonstration of God's mercy, providing an additional layer of protection for Cain despite his sinful actions. After being banished by God from his homeland and marked as a sign of his transgression, Cain departed into exile, carrying the weight of his curse. During his solitary journey, he met a woman and established a conjugal relationship. Although the details of how Cain met his wife are not explicitly mentioned in the biblical narrative, it is at this point that he finds a companion who becomes his wife. One of the most traditional theories suggests that Cain could have married one of his sisters. This interpretation is based on the understanding that, in the early stages of humanity, families were larger and marriage between siblings was considered acceptable. The absence of explicit restrictions against this practice in the biblical narrative also strengthens this theory. Adam and Eve had other children besides Cain, Abel, and Seth, who were not explicitly mentioned in the Bible. This interpretation is based on the remarkable longevity of individuals in the biblical narrative and the understanding that families were considerably larger at that time. The mention of other sons and daughters of Adam in Genesis 5 verse 4 strengthens this theory. The existence of unmentioned descendants of Adam and Eve is important to understand the multiplication of humanity in the early stages of history. These sons and daughters may have played a significant role in expanding the human population and genetic diversification, contributing to the variety of ethnic and cultural groups over time. Besides the narrative of Cain and his wife, the Bible presents other examples of marriage between close relatives. For instance, Abraham married Sarah, who was his half-sister, and Isaac married Rebekah, his cousin. These marriages are seen as acceptable within the cultural and social context of the time, and are presented as part of the divine plan to perpetuate the family lineage. In addition to the traditional interpretation that suggests Adam and Eve were the sole progenitors of the human race, there are alternative theories that explore the possibility of other human beings existing at the same time. These theories seek to reconcile the biblical narrative with archaeological and anthropological evidence, suggesting the presence of broader human communities in antiquity. From the relationship between Cain and his wife, a son named Enoch was born. This birth marked the beginning of a new phase in Cain's life, showing his determination to settle and create a community despite the adversities he faced. Surprisingly, Cain not only survived divine punishment, but also demonstrated resilience by deciding to build a city and name it after his son, Enoch. This city became a testament to the human capacity to overcome difficulties and chart a path forward, even in the face of past marks. Cain's choice to establish a community reflects his determination to create a legacy and challenge the consequences of his past actions. The laws against incest represent an important aspect of the evolution of marital practices throughout biblical history, reflecting changes in cultural perceptions and social needs. In the early stages of biblical history, especially in the Genesis accounts, marital practices were more flexible regarding family ties. For example, marriage between close relatives, such as siblings, was considered acceptable and even necessary for the propagation of the human race. This is evidenced by the marriages between brothers and sisters, as in the case of Cain and his wife, who, according to some interpretations, could have been his sister. Over time, as Jewish society developed and expanded, there arose the need for more detailed regulations on family relationships, including marriage. The Mosaic laws, attributed to Moses, represent divine regulation intended to guide the people of Israel on ethical and moral issues, including marriage and sexuality. Besides genetic considerations, the laws against incest also emphasized holiness and purity, promoting the idea that sexuality and marriage should be sacred and practiced in an ethical and morally correct manner. These laws reflected broader religious values about the importance of purity and sanctity in the life of the Christian people. Despite changes in marital laws and practices over time, some cultural traditions persisted. For example, marriage between distant relatives, such as cousins, was common in many cultures, including Jewish culture. These marriages were seen as a way to maintain family lineage continuity and strengthen community bonds. In summary, the laws against incest in the Jewish tradition represent a combination of genetic, ethical, and religious concerns intended to guide the Christian people in matters related to marriage and sexuality while preserving the community's health and integrity. These laws reflect the evolution of marital practices and moral conceptions throughout biblical history. In light of the various interpretations and theories discussed on topics such as Cain and his wife's story, the laws against incest, and the evolution of marital practices in the religious tradition, it is essential to recognize the diversity of perspectives present in religious traditions. Religious interpretations can vary widely, influenced by different cultural contexts, theological traditions, and hermeneutical approaches. For example, while some religious communities may adopt more literal interpretations of biblical narratives, others may favor more symbolic or allegorical approaches. Reflecting on the biblical and theological interpretations presented, it is crucial to recognize the importance of submission to the divine will. Through the scriptures, we perceive the need to trust in God's guidance in all aspects of our lives. Regardless of differences in interpretations, the central message of submission to God's will remains fundamental. Therefore, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to continue exploring these fascinating and enriching topics. By following our content, you can deepen your understanding of biblical narratives and reflect on their significance in your spiritual journey. Together, we can learn and grow in faith, seeking a deeper understanding of God's will in our lives.